This movie is about the Tribal Data Toolbox Exercise 6 and how to enter PM2.5 filter maintenance and quality control data. So, looking at Exercise 6, I see that it has me continue on, and following the PM filter data SOP, I have to enter the PM2.5 QC and maintenance check data for the two filter PM2.5 samplers. So I say, okay, what I'm going to do is open up my toolbox that's on my root drive, my trunk Tribal Data Toolbox, and that's on my C drive in a folder Tribal Data Toolbox 2.1, and this is the toolbox that I've been working from. So I open it, and I go to Routine Data Operations, Filter Method Monitoring. I click that button, and whoa, this looks different. Filter Methods Data Operations. So pre-field placement, there's the quality control and the maintenance checks that I do on the samplers. And then also, before I place my filters in the field, I have to enter the chain of custody data for the unexposed taired filters that I get from the lab, that I get from them, and they've weighed them before I put them out into the field. Then after I get them in the field, I have to record that information from the chain of custody forms. And then after I get the filter and it's run for 24 hours, I have to enter the data from the chain of custody for the shipping of the filters. I have to enter the field data sheet information where I say if there were any flags on the samplers or if a tree fell into the sampler during the 24 hours the filter was exposed. And then if I get data from the sampler, sometimes that's called interval data, I get that from the sampler, I can import that into the toolbox. Then after I get the results from the weighing laboratory, I import data from the weighing lab that I hope they send to me in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. So the first thing I say is, whoa, I think I better click here for the help file. And that should open the file called SOP for PM filter data, which is what the exercise asks us to do. Follow the SOP for PM filter data. Okay, good. So I've got the SOP out, and I can either control click on getting started or just go down, and it says from the main switchboard click on filter method monitoring, and then it goes through and explains what we're going to do in this exercise. So going back to the exercise now, it says you're going to enter PM2.5 QC and maintenance check data for the two samplers. So at the city center site, site 2, I have two PM2.5 filter based samplers. So these are samplers that I have to put a filter in, let it run, pumping air through the filter for 24 hours. Then I send the filter to be weighed again at a laboratory, and then I subtract, or the lab subtracts, the difference between the weight after it was exposed and before it was exposed, and divides it by the volume of air that the sampler pumped through that filter to get concentration. So I expose, these are co-located, so I've got two, and I think probably once every 12 samples I place two side by side, and that is an assessment of the precision of this system. So the exercise says that the PM functions of the toolbox are pretty parallel to the continuous method. So if you remember in that, we did the QC information and entered that into the toolbox first, and that's the same thing that we're doing here, but PM2.5 has much more QC requirements. So follow along in the SOP, taking notes, and read the entire exercise before beginning. So the first thing you notice is that we've got a lot of sheets. So in the QC sheets, we have to go to our exercise folder, and you can see in exercise 6 we've got the description and also this folder with QC and maintenance sheets. And you can see that there are a lot. We've got flow rate QC for instrument 2 and 3. Every 5 sampling events, maintenance checks for instruments 2 and 3. Monthly maintenance for both instruments. Every 6-month maintenance for both instruments, and annual maintenance for both instruments. All that information has to be entered into the toolbox in order to have that information when you're ready to validate the data. So let's look at the exercise again. So first of all, it says that these forms, these QC and maintenance forms, are examples. So we may not have all the information that the toolbox is asking for. Remember, as long as it's not a yellow field with a red border, we don't have to enter it. If it's yellow or yellow with a red border, you have to enter it. And it goes on to say, be sure to enter the AQS information into the form. Okay, each type of check has 2 sheets, and then each type of check is represented by the vertical list of buttons. So let's go back in the toolbox. What are you talking about? So let's click this QC and maintenance check data. That we know we usually go from top to bottom, and we haven't entered any yet, so we click on this. Alright, so let's take a look at the different types of checks that we have. So here they are. So we have flow rate QC checks. That's the first 2, instrument 2 and instrument 3. Every 5 sampling events. Okay, that's the next set of 2, every 5 sampling events. Then monthly QC check. Good. Instrument 2 and instrument 3, monthly QC check data. The next one, 6-month maintenance, 6-month, 6-month. And then finally annual, and we've got annual for instrument 2 and annual for instrument 3. So what we'd have to do is enter this information down the line. So let's open up the first one, which we have got. And you can see that it's a rather unexciting form, and it describes how the flow rate, a 3-point flow rate check, actually this one is repeated, so it's really only a 2-point flow rate check, was done for the instrument 2. Remember, there's instrument 2 and instrument 3 are co-located here at the City Center site. It was a standard that was certified by NIST, and it is not the one that we routinely use every time we place a filter. This is our standard that we hold to do these QC checks with. It's a BJI Delta Cal, that's its serial number, when it was calibrated, and then the temperature and pressure, and then the results of the flow rate checks, where the flow rate was measured by the standard to be 16 liters per minute, and by the sampler 16 liters per minute, perfectly on. Then 17 liters per minute measured by the standard. The sampler read a little high, 17.4 liters per minute, and again 17 and 17. So this data we have to enter into this. So we can see that if we pull this back and take a look at it, see if we can do this, we can see that you enter the information from this table here, where you've got a 3-point check. So well, really 2, because you're measuring 16 with the external flow rate standard, and then your sampler flow rate shows 16, and then 17, and your sampler shows 17.40. So looking here, you can see that goes into these boxes here, where the transfer standard flow rate is 16, the sampler's flow rate is 16, and when you enter those, the percent difference is automatically calculated. And that's just to help you. The next 17 and 17.4 goes in the next line, and you can see the percent difference is 2.35%, which is great. It has to be less than 4% difference, and you're fine. And here you've got 17 and 17. Make sure you click that yes, it passed the flow rate check. And then when you finish that one, that was done on the 5th, you could see from the folder of all of the different flow rate checks that you've also got the next one for instrument 3. So when you've entered this data for the first flow rate check for instrument 2, navigate to the next form by going down here to the bottom and clicking next. Then you can see it opens up to a new blank form, and you enter the next information, which is from the second check for instrument 3. And you continue on, you could see that that one has a flow rate of 16, 16, 17, 17, and 17.10, and you enter those in these boxes here. So those two are the quarterly sampler flow rate check sheets. Then when you've entered that data, what you need to do is look at what you need to enter next, and that's the 5 sampling events. These are all the different QC checks that are required for filter-based PM2.5 sampling. You can see that it's a lot. So we've entered that, let's just say. So we go down this line of all the different QC checks, and we click every 5 sampling events, and we click that. Now it automatically opens to a new blank record, and I've already entered the information. So I'll show you. This one is fairly simple. This is 5 sampling events, and basically you just have to do an external leak check, check the WINS impactor, and then say yes or no if it passed the check. So there are 2 such checks because we're looking at the every 5 sampling events. So in other words, every 30 days if you're sampling once every 6 days. And you've got 2 of those. So you enter those, you exit form, and then remembering to navigate between sampler entries using these navigation fast forward and rewind buttons at the bottom of the form. Then you go down to the monthly QC check. Again, I have entered this information already. So just looking at what is in the next set of checks, this is the monthly QC check, and it's really just monthly maintenance. So first for instrument 2, you could see that it's basically a sheet, and you might have this in your sampler box, and you go through and you put in this information. Will probably be in handwriting if you're doing such checks, and you should if you're doing filter-based PM2.5 checks. And one thing that's important to notice is it's always good to say more than pass-fail. It's always good to record the actual values. The form that we have in the toolbox has check boxes, which are relatively easy to check or not check, and then you navigate to the next. So this is for the city center sampler serial number instrument 2, and we enter that information that it passed, and then we go to the next one, which is instrument 3, and all of these checks passed. So we've got here instrument 2, and we go to instrument 3, and we see that we've entered that data as pass. Then, once we've entered that data, then we go to the next set of QC checks, which is the every 6-month maintenance check. And all these checks have to be done. You may be combining different types of checks in different forms, but these checks have to be done in order for filter-based PM2.5 data to be considered valid according to the EPA guidance. So the 6-month maintenance check for instrument 2 and instrument 3. So let's just look at what we've entered. I'm going to go back to the first. So instrument 2, it was on, see, 6-month instrument 2. Pretty easy. What did you do? You replaced the large inline filter, you cleaned the air screens rain hoods, and you checked the voltage of the battery. And those check boxes are here. If in your case, for your own data, you read a voltage on the battery, you could enter that here if you wanted to. The main thing to check is yes or no, whether it passed these checks, and that you have the record that these checks were done. That's really important. So you do enter that one, and that's for instrument 2, and then you go to the next instrument 3, and you go down the line, and you take a look at that, and yes, that passed, and you enter that data. Okay, we did that one. So let's say we entered those, and now we've got to enter finally the annual maintenance. So let's click exit form and click the last brown box in this vertical column for the different QC checks. And the annual maintenance is more comprehensive. If you want to just click yes or no, whether you've done these things, or add comments, that's available also. So looking at instrument 2, annual maintenance, what we've got here is all these checks. And again, this could be a form that you have in your sampler box, or a form that you have in your logbook, or perhaps you record all these things in your logbook. And at this point for your program, you would be looking through your logbook and entering all these. Yes, 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 these things were done. So let's see what I entered. So for instrument 2, on the 2nd of March, we did all these things. Yes, 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 and it passed. Yes. Then we say, okay, we did that one. So now I'm going to click the forward arrow down here, and now I'm going to enter it for instrument 3. I did this check on the same day, on March 2nd. And yes, 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 and it passed. So it's important, again, you must enter the information that is in the fields with the red border and that are in yellow. The fields that are in the red border are really hard to change afterwards because those are key fields. So these fields link the different data in the different forms, which go in different tables. And it's important to say yes or no that it passed. So yes, now we have completed the data entry for all these different kinds of QC checks. I'm going to say exit form, and now I've entered all of this. I'm going to say exit form, and we've done the very first set of QC and maintenance check data entering, which is you have to make sure that your samplers are operating, basically. The rest of the buttons are relevant to what you actually do with the filters, but in the first place you have to verify and document that your samplers were operating well, within guidelines at least, during this period of time when you're doing the sampling.